Well, I think we'll make a start, actually. Welcome, everyone, to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the Committee, and to my right, I'm joined by my colleagues. We will be making the decisions in front of us on the cases this evening. I should say that potentially we will have two other councillors joining us, but the quorum for this committee is 3, so it's entirely in order that we actually start now. If I can get underway by asking Mr. Traherne, have we had any apologies for our absence?
No.
Okay, thank you. As I say, it may be that colleagues do in fact come in. Are there any declarations of interest, colleagues? There are none. Are there any other declarations? No, there are none. In that case, we can move straight on to the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting that was held on the 27th of April. Those have been circulated. Can I ask for agreement that I sign those? Thank you. Very good. Now, we just have a couple of items on the agenda this evening. In a moment or two, we are going to start with the application relating to Kensington High Street and the top of the Earls Court Road, often known as the Odeon site. And then we will move on to the 2 applications to discharge conditions relating to Warnington Green Estate. Okay. So, in that case, I think we can move straight into the first case, and I think Julia Drevetsky. Julia, you're going to introduce this, aren't you? So please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. So, yes, the first application is seeking permission under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to seek minor alterations to the previously granted scheme. First of all, I would like to draw members' attention to the addendum report. The wording of condition 52 is recommended to be amended. I will now show some visuals and plans. So in this image, you can see the proposed alterations to the previously consented scheme. Those has been marked in blue. So on the right-hand side, I'll show, hopefully you can see the cursor. There is a proposed alterations to the canopies, additional floor space to the office just below the archway, the alterations to the terrace fronting Kensington High Street, and additional massing to Block 3. There are also other proposed alterations, including changes to conditions and satellite dish. This visual shows the consented scheme on the left-hand side and proposed development on the right-hand side. Again, you can see the proposed alterations to the canopies and the roof terrace along Kensington High Street. This is the proposed canopy. The consented scheme on the left-hand side and proposed on the right-hand side, showing the proposed squared off extension, and it shows its relation with the wider development and the building on the corner of Earls Court Road and Kensington High Street. Again, this image shows the proposed alterations. On this image, you can see the proposed 3 balconies at the rear of the building. It is worth noticing that there are already terraces that have been previously granted on level 2 and 4. So the additional balconies are proposed on level 3, 5, and 6. The section on the left-hand side shows the proposed balconies within the clouds. You can also see the section and part of the carriage lodge just over here. And then the elevation on the right-hand side again shows the proposed balconies and the previously granted terraces on the lower and upper levels. You can also see that the proposed terraces are proposed to be set away from the elevation. This is the consented proposed massing. On the left-hand side, we've got the previously consented scheme, and then on the right-hand side are the proposed scheme. And then again, consented and proposed massing just from a different angle. The consented scheme on the left-hand side and proposed massing on the right-hand side. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, there are no speakers this evening for this case. Colleagues, any questions? Otherwise, I'd like to start. Maybe the slide that you describe as additional balconies is perhaps the best one. I'm just slightly concerned about the impact on residents who live in Carriage Lodge. Carriage Lodge is the building towards the top of the Earls Court Road where, in effect, the development is taking place around it. Can you just I just want to make certain I've understood things that have already been consented and things which are actually new and proposed. Can you just run through that, please?
No problem. I think this image might be the best one. So we've got the balconies on the upper levels, which are way above the carriage lodge, so that wouldn't really affect the residents. Then I know that there's a consent from the balconies on the 3rd floor level. However, you can see that there is a large terrace already on the 2nd floor level, which has already been granted. Hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen. And then there's also a previously consented terrace above the proposed balcony. So the blue balcony that's what's being proposed as part of the current application, and the terraces above and below has been previously granted. That's the carriage lodge just to the right-hand side, with the windows within the light well. So some of the windows, yes, you will be able to see that balcony from those windows, but because of the existing terrace already on the level 2, in our opinion, there will be no additional sense of overlooking from that element.
Okay, so in other words, the views from the new balconies, the lowest level one, which I think you say is it level 3 or level 4?
Level 3.
Level 3. That has a sort of oblique, so if someone stood at the left-hand edge of that balcony, they do potentially look across
and
to
down,
Carriage
yes.
Lodge, but that's all, and the other ones are obviously much higher up.
Yes, the upper levels are much higher from the Carriage Lodge, but yes, the chairman is correct. Because of the angle, you will only be able to see really from that edge of the terrace down to the Carriage Lodge. And that balcony is also set back a little bit from the edge of the elevation.
Right. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Jared.
Just sticking with Carriage Lodge, please. One or two of the objectors are talking about the changes that and effect on light that the changes of this application will bring. Could you just outline any changes in light, particularly on the flats in Carriage Lodge, versus the previous granted application, please?
So probably this image is the most useful for that question. So we've got the consented scheme on the left-hand side. As you can see, the massing on that level within that building has already been granted. The only additional massing would be from the terraces on the level 3 that are being proposed, and that would have slightly impact on those properties. However, in our opinion, given the previously consented massing on the area and the urban setting, we've recommended that is acceptable. It would only be that impact from the terraces.
And the cumulative impact of the changes on top of don't concern you?
It would be acceptable, yes.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you just outline the changes in the wording for parking spaces and EV charging points and just explain to us what those proposed changes are, please?
Sorry. Yes, so that's the condition 26. So as part of the, because of the scale of the development, there had to be quite a few alterations in terms of when parts of the development can be implemented and completed, and part of the development will not be completed in time for occupation for the whole site. So it's been proposed to address the expectation that part of the site's been going to be completed before the rest of the development. All on-site car parking spaces will be suitable for blue badge holders. However, in our opinion, given the kind of phasing of the development, it would be acceptable to have the details of the car parking later on when the scheme is being completed.
Thank you. In the EV charging points, how many of the bays, what percentage of the bays will have EV charging points?
There are no proposed changes from the previously consented scheme on that element. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the correct condition. So the condition 26 is still going to be 28 car parking spaces within the car stacker shall have been provided with active electric vehicle charging points. That is the same as the consented scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I just got two more quick points. The first is in relation to that third floor balcony, which is sort of at right angles to Carriage Lodge, just coming back to the previous conversation. I mean, could we put a condition of some sort of screening on that? It would be, you know, on that side of the balcony if we wished. I mean, it might do something, you know, to assist amenity of people living in Carriage Lodge. Could we do that, do you think?
If I can just add, is the concern more in terms of the privacy, or that is the most I think possibly a screening, or we could the members could condition some kind of a physical barrier between the railings on the site. But yes, I would probably in terms of the screening, I would be quite careful in terms of the height as well, because that might impact the light to those residents. But there could be some physical barriers, for example, planters, that we could condition.
I mean, I'm just thinking really of some kind of, you know, trellis or something, which, as you say, doesn't have an effect on light, but it adds a degree of privacy, which I think people living in Carriage Lodge might find useful. And I think only at that level, because I think the higher balconies that are proposed, I think are clearly quite different. They're much higher than the roof level of Carriage Lodge. In fact, so I don't think it's an issue then. But does that sound reasonable, colleagues? You know, so I think maybe we'll think about that. The other thing I would just ask is, I know there is an element of change to the basement here in this application, but I'm really wondering whether condition 17 you know, archaeology, a program of investigation. I don't know, you know, this is mainly, you know, about the addition of some balconies and some small changes to the a scheme. Do we really require a condition about archaeology in relation to this?
So that condition actually been carried out from the consented scheme. So in terms of the section 73, we've recommended it to ensure the applicant complies with the previously consented discharge of the details that we've already granted. We're not asking any additional information. The applicant just has to comply with the discharge of condition application and the reference within that condition.
So essentially it's a carryover.
That's correct.
From something previous. Okay. Well, I suppose reluctantly we probably have to go along with that. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but never mind. Okay, so any other comments? No, thank you. That's great. So we need to make a decision. I would suggest that on balance, the addition of, it would have to be an extra condition relating to the third floor balcony that is by Carriage Lodge, that there is some kind of screening on the flank of that, the side of that faces Carriage Lodge, to be agreed by officers, something like a trellis and you know, normal wording of something like that, just as a small additional measure of privacy for people living quite nearby. Does that seem sensible to colleagues? Okay. Well, and officers, you're happy with that? Good. Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can probably make a decision. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions attached, plus that extra condition that we've just discussed. So on that basis, can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? So that is agreed. Thank you. Thank you. If we can now move on to consider the discharge of condition applications, I think Cheryl, Cheryl, you're going to introduce these, aren't you?
Thank you, and good evening, councillors. Both applications before you this evening are returning to the committee following a deferral from a previous committee. So what I shall do is recap very briefly what the applications are seeking to discharge, and then I shall focus on how the proposals have evolved following the last time committee saw the details presented. Okay, so the application concerns details required by conditions that are attached to a reserved matters approval for Phase 2B, which is also known as Block 6, of the planning permission for the Wernington Green estate. So to remind the committee that the principle of the redevelopment of the estate has been established through the planning permission that was granted by the council back in 2010. And a design code was also approved which provides specific detailed parameters for the physical development of the site. And then following that, the Phase 2 reserved matters of appearance, means of access, landscaping, layout and scale have also been approved. So the current applications that are before you this evening are required by the reserved matters approval for Block 6 for design details specifically. And what you're looking at is the most detailed level of development design that we are able to consider in planning terms. So those details were presented to the planning committee at the end of April, and generally the committee considered that most of the proposals were acceptable. However, the decision was deferred because there were concerns about details, specifically about 2 elevations of Block 6. So the map that you can see on screen, and I note that you have copies to hand as well of this presentation, identifies those elevations that make up Block 6. And within the application, there are submissions that cover 8 conditions, but the ones that I'm going to focus on this evening are the elevations that were of concern to the committee, which are Murchison Gardens, which is the subject of Condition 4, and then Wernington Road, which is the subject of Conditions 6 and 7. The committee expressed concerns about 2 things in the main. Firstly, the colour of the metal panel cladding to the parapet to the top of the buildings, to both of those elevations, and then also the appearance of the Murchison Gardens elevation, specifically about metalwork and balconies. So since that meeting at the end of April, the applicant has provided further justification, revised drawings and additional visuals in support of their proposals, and in assessing the application, all of those documents, as well as the material samples, have been viewed by officers on site in accordance with the condition requirements. And additionally, the applicant has brought the sample panels as they relate to these 2 conditions, which I've just moved closer to me just to assist with this presentation. So turning first then to the Wernington Road elevation, you can see here the front elevation of those buildings, and there's a dotted line which encloses an extract of the building frontage, which is on the next image here. So at the very left of this slide, what you can see is the detailed bay study that was presented to you previously. And the committee considered that the grey colour of the metal cladding should be amended. The applicant has provided a drawing correction to the colour of the roof parapet, which was previously shown in grey. So if you look at the very top of the building, the image on the left, you can see there's a grey band that goes across the top of the building. That has been corrected, which is what you can see in the second image. And it confirms that it's bronze coloured, which was always the intention. So you'll see that noted in the addendum report as a correction to the proposals, but the rest of the top story is as before, so it's got a curtain walling glazed spandrel panel that surrounds the fenestration. And then on the rest of that slide, you can see a list of the materials and photographs of the sample panels that we have here. Moving then to Murchison Gardens, this is the elevation that the committee saw previously. So you can see here Murchison Gardens, but at the very ends of the block are the flanks of Wernington Road and the Portobello Road buildings. And again, there's a dotted line which encloses an extract of the building for a bay study elevation. So on this slide, this is the image presented previously to the committee, which generated some concerns about the grey colour used to the top story for the metal cladding. And also comments were made about the extent of metalwork, particularly the metal panels below the single windows that are staggered on that elevation, and also the metal sheet to the enclosure of the balconies, and also the extent of the balconies themselves. So the applicant has taken on board the comments made by the committee and has made some changes to the elevation, namely to the windows and to the balconies. So firstly, regarding colour, much like the Wernington Road, which was a clarification and correction, in this instance on Murchison Gardens, the applicant hasn't amended the colour, stating that the grey silver colour does form part of the colour palette set out in the approved design code, and that the use of that colour would match other metalwork to the lower levels of that building. And then moving on to the windows, the committee previously queried the staggering of those single windows, and in response to that, the staggering is a deliberate design feature. The design code requires a playful expression to this block, and the staggering is a way of meeting that, and it also does provide some visual interest to the elevation. The single windows themselves serve bedrooms, and that's the reason why they have a half height for privacy. And just to remind the committee that the size and positioning of those windows are already approved. So what is before you tonight is the appearance of them. In particular, looking at the proposal which has evolved now so that the metal spandrel panel has been replaced with a recessed brick detailing. Then moving on to the balconies, the committee previously queried the size, positioning and appearance of them. The size and positioning of the balconies have already been approved, and they relate to the overall sizes of the flats, so in accordance with the space standards. But the appearance of the balconies, the applicant has listened to the committee's comments on those and has revised them so that the metal sheet panel, which previously was fronting the balcony, has now been replaced with black metal railings. So what that means is there are black metal railings on all sides of that balcony. I have an image here which shows a precedent of that recessed brickwork detailing, which is used on phase 1, so it has now been repeated on the phase 2 building. And the applicant has also provided us with some additional visuals that shows how the proposals were last time versus how they would appear now. And these are, CGI visuals of that elevation. So, one more visual actually, and this shows you in a bit more detail the appearance of that brickwork spandrel panel to the bottom half of that window opening, and then the balcony detail as revised. So just to remind you, the key issue for your assessment this evening is whether those proposed details would have an acceptable impact on the appearance of the redeveloped estate, on the townscape, and in the opinion of officers, the further justification, the revisions made to the proposals, and the additional information are considered to positively respond to the comments and concerns raised by the committee last time, and these details are considered acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Questions? Tom?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a definite improvement over last time. I think you did say, but can you repeat why the balconies can't cover all 3 window panels? Why some of them can only cover 2 window panels?
Yes, I can. Firstly, I just want to refer you to the paragraphs in the report at 2.9 to 2.13, really, which assesses the balcony proposals. So, firstly, the balconies, the size of them relates to the flats that they serve. So, smaller balconies serve the smaller sized flats, and the largest balconies serve the larger size homes, and they do comply with the space standards for providing external amenity. At this point in time, the groundworks have already been carried out to Block 6, so I'm referring to paragraph 2.11 specifically in the report. The structural frame for the development has already been calculated in a way that would support the loading of balconies as shown here, because they were the approved positions. And so at this point, it would not be really feasible to make changes to those groundworks without adding significant delay to the project overall. So what the applicant has done is looked at the approval granted by the council for the position and size of the balconies, done their structural calculations to enable groundworks to proceed, and they are now seeking approval for the design of the enclosure.
So basically the positions are already approved, so
Yes,
there's
that's
no point
correct.
arguing about it. I mean, I have my doubts whether the structural works would need to change at all to extend that balcony a tiny bit further, but it's been approved, so there's no point discussing it further. Thank you.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can probably make a decision. I think overall, the revisions are an obvious improvement to my mind. And I think while we were rather underwhelmed previously, I think now, on balance, I would have thought this should be considered to be acceptable and reasonable. I think particularly the alterations to Merchiston Gardens, I think Actually having traditional railings on the balconies, I think, helps lighten the appearance of the building and makes it look, look definitely better. So, if there are no other comments or questions to officers, so this is the first discharge of condition application, the one ending 7715 that we've been discussing. So the recommendation is that we approve the details submitted. Can I see those in favour of that, please? So that is agreed. Okay, thank you. So if we can now move on to the second discharge of conditions application, and so back to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't repeat my introduction, but what I will flag is that this application relates to Murchison Gardens and Portobello Road only, requiring sample panels of facing stonework and brickwork, external metalwork and windows. The committee, as I said before, expressed concerns about the appearance of Murchison Gardens, the colour of the metal panel cladding and the elevation appearance with regards to the metalwork. So as it relates to Murchison Gardens, you have just seen these slides to remind you where we were when it was presented in April and where we are now with the with the application before approving the details of the elevation. So what is before you now is the material samples. And the materials here show the different materials proposed for the composition of that facade. I'll point out that the brickwork sample panel is shown in that image too. We don't have that here this evening. So again, the key issue for your consideration is whether these materials in the composition that has just been approved would have an acceptable impact on the appearance of the block and the townscape. And in the opinion of officers' assessment, it would.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions on this? No. I mean, clearly, these are modern buildings, and surprise, surprise, the palette of colours and things used correspond to the things that modern buildings tend to have. So I think colleagues, it would be quite difficult for us to suddenly say that these were unacceptable. Any comments or questions to officers, really? At all?
The brickworks and the railings are a great improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Okay, well, in that case, I think we can probably move to a decision. So this is the second discharge of condition application, the one ending 0887. The recommendation is to approve. Can I see those in favour of approval, please? So that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed. And that actually concludes our meeting for this evening. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for taking the trouble to come along. Thank you. Good evening.